praise your name, I will praise your name. When times of need carry on, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. Though darkness falls all around, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. If I forget what I found, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider, you're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my soul. I will praise your name, I will praise your name. If I feel lost and alone, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. Though I may labor in vain, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. Through all the heartache and pain, I will praise your name, I will praise your name. For you are faithful, Lord, you lift my head. You're my provider, you're my strength and joy. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship you. I love you, Lord. I'll honor. I will trust you, Lord. I'll trust you, Lord. I'll worship everything I say. I love you, Lord. I'll honor you. I'll trust, never let me go. I'll worship, never let me down. I'll love, forever I will love you. I'll love, I'll trust every hour, every day. That's why I worship you. I'll praise you, Lord. I'll honor you. Lord, I will lift up my song. I will praise your name. I will praise your name.
Hallelujah. Let Lord Jesus Christ shine forth. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. Welcome to another live stream with DCCI Ministries. And tonight we do have privilege of having Anthony Rogers with us. Peace of Christ be with you, brother.
And also with you.
How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing great.
I can't remember if I said sorry for last week. Uh, I let I let you down. Actually, first you let me down, and then I let you down. I think we are even there. But I'm sorry about last week. We did have you last week, but we did have some issues. Some issues came up middle of the live stream, and then therefore we had to reschedule it for today. Um, Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit what have you been up to? How is life going with you? Give us a little bit update with you, your family, your ministry.
Sure. So, as you know, and some of your guests will know, I am a pastor here in the United States on the East Coast. I serve specifically in the prisons, and because of COVID, the prisons are locked down. So, a lot of my work is spent uh, corresponding with prisoners either through some sort of written medium or through phone calls, as well as sending them materials and stuff like that. I also have an evening job, which is different from that, but I won't give the details on it, lest some of the uh, uh, unsavory guests decide to bombard me in that context. But aside from that, of course, I also run a YouTube page under my name, Anthony Rogers. So I do live streams there. In fact, I'll be doing one later this evening, I think in about 7 hours or so. Uh, I think that's 3 o'clock your time, but 10 o'clock East Coast time. And we'll be looking at the Gospel of Mark. So I wanted to start a series on that. I think I've already done one already, if not two. I'm pretty sure it's only one. We looked at the external evidence for Markan authorship, and today we're going to be looking at the internal evidence for Markan authorship. And as far as family goes, everyone's doing well here. I have 4 children, and my youngest has a uh, immunocompromised health situation. So, although I do have certain duties that take me out and about to some degree, I am pretty careful just to keep her safe. But everybody's doing well here. And recently, I did a debate with Unitarian philosopher slash rationalist Dale Tuggy. And so, because of that, Unitarians are all aflutter. They're all concerned. They're acting like I beat up their boyfriend. Um, but that is what it is. Uh, I won't say more about that. But oh, I will say this. Here's something.
Sorry.
Here's something interesting about it. Uh, they have a
Sorry.
uh, Facebook page linked to this guy's work, where a lot of his fan base goes and so forth. And you won't be surprised to know that a lot of Muslims are members on that page. And so Muslims and Unitarians are basically, they're
Working
all
together.
coming after me on the page. Not just me, they'll talk about other people. But lately, they've just been a buzz talking about me. And I just find it interesting, although not surprising, that Muslims and Unitarians are bedfellows, right? They're basically kissing cousins. They're basically peas in a pod. They're the same religion with very little difference, right? The only difference between them is the character of Muhammad. But both of them alike have false God. Both of them have no Christ who can truly save them from their sins. And so it's not surprising that they would both, even though they aren't exactly part of the same religion, would band together, right? Just like the Psalm says in Psalm 2, when it says, "Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth take their stand, and the peoples take counsel together against the Lord and against his Christ." Right? So the people of the world who are otherwise at odds with each other on all sorts of issues are all united in this. They hate the true God. And so uh, I don't find it surprising that Muslims and Unitarians are banding together uh, in an effort to refute the true God.
I think it was a couple of years ago at Speaker's Corner. Um, I usually engage with Muslim people, and I noticed they were using Jehovah Witnesses arguments and Unitarian arguments. I was like, oh, like they don't even do their own homework. They just like steal other people's arguments and then bring it to corner. Even there
Y-
is heretic at the corner. Sometimes you get to see Muslims are working together, learning arguments from heretic, and then coming to us to critique us. Just
Yeah,
sad reality.
yeah. Well, one thing is when you think about it, it's not surprising that they would appeal to these groups because when Muslims come up with their own arguments, they end up looking like, Jesus went to the bathroom. Jesus' mother ate food, right? So they've got to go to Unitarians to come up with something that doesn't sound, 1,000 times as silly. Not that Unitarian arguments are good; they're not cogent at all. But when your arguments are reduced to, Jesus' mother ate food, Jesus went to the bathroom, you really ought to start looking to other people to help you out here. That's where Muhammad leaves them, right, with these sorts of things. But this is a common thing. We've noticed this for a long time that they actually appeal to Unitarians, and that's part of the reason I've taken an interest in engaging Unitarians. If Muslims are going to keep using their material, well, then I'll go after the people who are actually providing that material to them and show that the people they're appealing to just don't, have the goods. They're not really anyone that's going to be able to help them.
But there's a strange reality over there because Muslims are choosing Muhammad and Islamic scholars. They are just getting rid of Muhammad and Islamic scholars, and they are going to Unitarians to learn from them. That's sad reality. But uh, well, someone needs to destroy their arguments. So thank you for faithfully stepping in to deal with them. That's good. That's good. And I noticed that Brother Phil put the link to debate. Please do watch it and learn the arguments, and we get to use them. It helps us to be confident in our scripture as well as it helps us with our communication skills when we engage people who are anti-Christ. That's in note. So tonight I thought we kind of start from the beginning, like just forget what happened last Saturday or last Sunday. We start from beginning and we talk about Allah and his attributes because my understanding was Islam is a monotheist ideology and Allah is one and there is nothing like Allah. But you had a debate with Dr. Shabir Ali, and the things you brought it up made people to be confused actually what is all going there with Allah and his parts and his attributes. So I thought we have you tonight, you teach us so we can learn it and we can use it in our evangelism.
Yeah. So one thing, starting off with, if anybody didn't watch the debate, and perhaps even for those that did and maybe need a refresher on this, the observation I made in the debate is while Islam, on the one hand, claims to present absolute monotheism over and against Christianity, which often just involves misrepresenting Christianity, right? Christians are absolute monotheists, meaning we believe there is only one God. And we don't divide the essence of God, meaning we say that all three persons possess the one undivided essence. So we are absolute monotheists in that sense. However, we do not say that monotheism precludes any kind of diversity in God. We affirm that God has attributes and exists in a plurality of persons without being divided. So, if Muslims are going to claim that they have absolute monotheism and no tinge of plurality, and that's what they mean by absolute monotheism, well, then we should be able to see that in their scriptures, in their authoritative sources, and of course, we should be able to see that as the hallmark of Islam throughout the ages, but that just isn't the case. When we look at the Islamic sources and we look at the Islamic scholars throughout history, we find them just enmeshed in a whole morass of problems. And so the point that I made in the debate is, number one, according to the earliest Muslims, the traditionists, Allah has a plurality of attributes. And here, people need to pay close attention because people aren't used to thinking along these lines. They just let Muslims say stuff and don't really think to analyze it. But Muslims actually claim, the earliest Muslims, that Allah has a plurality of attributes, and these attributes are not identical to his being. Okay, they are not identical to his being. He has a plurality of independently existing attributes. And so, one of the most obvious examples of that is the Quran, which is supposedly Allah's eternal speech. No Muslim would or does say that the Quran is Allah. They all say it's something other than Allah, but they say it's eternal. And so if it's eternal and yet not Allah, then you have an attribute that is something other than him. And this is only one of Allah's attributes, right? According to Muslims, Allah has 99 plus names. By the way, you play clips from Yasser Qadi a lot. Yasser Qadi has pointed out that the hadith that talk about Allah's 99 names doesn't say he only has 99 names. That's just, a sort of a bare minimum, right? And so these names have corresponding attributes or characteristics. Allah has at least 99 plus. So the last thing Muslims can really claim is that they believe in that Allah is absolutely one without any plurality. What's even worse is, once again, the earliest Muslims not only believed that Allah has a plurality of attributes that you might call spiritual or metaphysical. They wouldn't use the term spiritual, but I think people understand better if I use that language, immaterial type attributes. But they also think that he has anthropomorphic qualities. So, for example, Allah has a face, according to the early traditionists. Allah has eyes. He has hands. He has a shin. He has a foot. Now, some Muslims will debate whether Allah has 2 feet or only 1 foot. Some Muslims will debate whether he has 2 eyes or more than 2 eyes. But those who affirm this from the earliest days are at least affirming that he has these anatomical bodily features, right? They'll say he has a form, he has palms, fingers, fingertips. I mean, the list of attributes is quite long. And in my debate, one of the ones that I brought up, and I did this quite intentionally because it allowed me to bring out more than one issue here, but among Allah's attributes is the fact that Allah has loins, according to the hadith. Loins, right? To put it in somewhat more crude terms so that people don't miss it, he has gonads, is a term that's sometimes used. Now, a lot of people won't know this because, and this is one of the other points that it allowed me to bring out, because Muslims are not even honest when they translate their sources. Okay, there are 3 hadiths in Sahih Bukhari where the original Arabic says Allah has loins. Now, everybody, I think, through some of the stuff you've talked about, knows about Allah's about the womb, right? There are various hadiths that talk about Allah, about a womb, right? This womb that exists up there with Allah. Well, in some of these hadiths, particularly 3 of them found in Sahih Bukhari, when they're translated into English, it drops the reference to the womb grabbing hold of Allah's loins. Okay, at one point, there's a discussion between this primordial ancient womb and Allah, and in order to get its way, this womb reached up and grabbed Allah by his loins, and then the hadith says Allah, said, "Stop it! What are you doing?" Right? And I say it in a high-pitched voice because I don't know how else anyone grabbed by the loins would be speaking at that point. In any case, so Allah says, "What are you doing?" And then the loins, or excuse me, the womb petitions Allah to grant it its petition, right? The womb wants Allah to bless those who favor the ties of kinship, so those who are good to their family and so forth. And so this is why, to this day, according to the Islamic sources, God blesses those who are good to their family members, because there's this ancient womb up there with Allah that one time grabbed him by the loins and got Allah to do what it wanted. Um, the point is that the Islamic sources were understood by the earliest Muslims to teach that Allah has a plurality of attributes, including physical bodily appendages. Now, as time develops, they start trying to refine this, because people, when early on, people will just swallow this sort of thing, but eventually they start to see there's problems here. And you could already start to imagine some of the problems. If this is true of Allah, then how can Allah be the creator of the world, right? When we say that God created the world, we mean that he brought space, matter, and time into existence. But if Allah has all of these features, then how could he have existed prior to the creation of the world, right? Space, matter, time, in which Allah could exist, right? You can't have hands, face, eyes, shin, feet, and so forth unless you have an environment, a context. And so they had to start, uh, you know, dealing with this, especially because Muslims were now coming into contact with philosophers, right? And philosophers pointed these sorts of things out. They said, you've got to say he doesn't have parts. You've got to say that he certainly doesn't have an anatomy. And so some Muslims started saying things like, well, he has hands, but they're not like our hands, right? He has a face, but it's not like our face. Shin, but it's not like our shin. And the Islamic expression is bila khaif, right? We don't ask how, right? We just say he has these things because he says he does, and we don't ask how, right? We just shut our thinking processes down. Well, this led certain Muslims, known as the Mu'tazili, and even prior to them, the Jahmiyyah, to deny anything like this. They denied that Allah has any of these attributes, not just the attributes of face, eyes, hands, and so forth, but any attributes, the attribute of speech, the attribute of life, the attribute of knowledge or hearing. All these attributes had to be rejected and were rejected by these early Muslims. In fact, Jaham, the early Muslim who one of the earliest who started advocating this view. He's pretty early. He comes along, I would say, I mean, it was in the first century of Islam, right? Before the end of the first century of Islam. And so already you have people reacting to what was being taught by the traditionists, those who were the safeguards of the hadith traditions that were being handed on and memorized and circulated and so forth. And then after them came the Mu'tazili, who again rejected that Allah has attributes and many other things that Muslims believe. Now, all of this was rejected as heresy in Muslim, in Muslim parlance. It was considered kafir and so forth, or even shirk, because they were denying Allah's attributes. They charged them with negation, negating Allah's attributes. So the Mu'tazili and the Jahmiyyah accused the traditionists of being guilty of shirk, of associating plurality with Allah, and the traditionists then returned the favor and said that these people are guilty of being negators, negating Allah and his attributes. After that came along another group that came to be known as the Ashari and the Maturidi, and these basically tried to create a compromised position between these two extremes of saying Allah has attributes, he doesn't have attributes. But what they ended up doing was creating a contradiction. So, for example, Al-Ashari said that Allah's attributes are not he, nor are they other than he, right? But think that through. If they're not he, meaning they're not Allah, well, then they're other than Allah, right? But if they're other than Allah, then they are other than Allah. I mean, you can't have it both ways. So this is the state of affairs in Islam throughout its history. Now the question is, does the Quran or the Ahadith teach this, right? And that's what we're going to look at, I think, today. But that's basically my argument, that there's this problem here.
So, Islam's supposed to be like clear religion and everything is all good, everyone living happily after. I don't understand like what is it means to be he attributes of Allah is part of him but also not part of him. Like, what does that mean? What is the like most orthodox view on it? No
Well,
one
that's just the
knows.
thing. They can't solve the problem, right? They now notice, by the way, this isn't like the Trinitarian position that they ridicule, right? When Christians say that God exists in three persons, we're not saying that there's this person here and then this other person somehow added to him, right? Who's some separately existing being who could be divided from him or something like that. We're saying there are three persons who exist in the one God, who possess the same divine nature. But Muslims are actually saying these attributes are something other than Allah's essential being, and they're other than each other. And so it really is shirk, right? The early philosophers in Islam were right about that. The problem is, because they rejected the Trinity, they couldn't solve the problem either. When the Mu'tazili said Allah has no attributes, they ended up saying that Allah can't be defined. If Allah has no attributes, what do you mean when you're talking about Allah? Right? When we say God, what do we mean? We mean that being who is omniscient, omnipotent, he knows all things, he's all powerful, he's all wise, he's all good, right? When Muslims talk this way, they're kind of pulling the wool over other people's eyes or even their own eyes, because in their system you can't really say that, because these attributes are something other than Allah, right? In addition to him. So they're not really definitional of his being. I mean, so you just have this huge problem, and this brings out another issue. This is why I started thinking about this. Muslims, as you were just talking about, they say that their religion is simple. They say that it's clear, and this is one of their main talking points. When they go out and do dawah, they are always saying our doctrine of God is simple. Everyone agrees on it. Christians have a complicated doctrine of God. Now, I'm not critical of the idea that talking about God can be complicated. We shouldn't expect it not to be, right? We're talking about God here. And if something in creation can be complicated, and there are all sorts of things that are complicated, then we shouldn't expect anything less when it comes to God. But Muslims are the ones who argue that their doctrine is simple, clear, and agreed upon by all Muslims. But none of those things are true. Their doctrine is not simple, and it is not agreed upon by Muslims. They're at war with each other. There are videos online. You go to Speaker's Corner, you see this more than I do, but there are videos online where these groups are actually present and arguing with each other over Allah's attributes, right? And this has been going on for 1400 years. So the point I'm making here is not a criticism that this can be complicated, but that Muslims claim it's not complicated, and they use that as an argument to prop up Islam. Islam is complicated. Its doctrines are difficult for the average Muslim to get through, and so I mean, it's just not honest when they engage in that, or perhaps they're just ignorant, of what's actually the case.
So, just the language I can understand. When we say attributes of Allah, we are talking about speech of Allah. We are talking about Allah to be eternal, His will, His power, His knowledge, His sight, His hearing, judging, punishing, forgiving, providing, alongside of His body parts. Correct?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And let me just read a Muslim for you here that admits this, just so you know I mean, first of all, what's most important is that this can be demonstrated to be an issue. There is this discussion in Islam throughout its history. That's what the facts say. But here's a Muslim basically admitting this. This is from Muhammad ibn Khalifa al-Tamimi, and this was translated by Abu Safwan Farid Haibatan, and it's called Tawheed of Allah's Most Beautiful Names and Lofty Attributes, the Belief of al-Sunnah wa al-Jama'ah. And here's what he says. This is page 35 and 36. The realm of the names and attributes is regarded to be one of the most dangerous areas because of the fact that it has been the subject of severe and complex differences. Okay, severe and complex differences. I'm still quoting now. This war broke out between the Salaf at one end and the philosophers, al-Kalam, and the Mushabiha at the other. These are just terms for so he's saying that this disagreement broke out between the Salaf, the early companions, and the scholastic theologians in Islam, and those who they think were guilty of likening Allah to his creation, the Mushabiha. And then it says, hence it is from the obligatory duties of the students of knowledge to profoundly understand to a deep level the truth that is based upon the book and Sunnah. So he's saying because this is such a serious, severe, and complex issue, fraught with many dangers, Muslims have to make a special effort here to really understand these issues. Okay, so this just is the reality of the case. Muslims are not being honest, or at least not showing themselves to be familiar with the issues when they claim that their doctrine is simple and clear, and so forth.
So, what would you say to the statement such as the attributes are not identical to Allah's essence, they are distinct from His essence?
That's shirk. If you have an attribute called Allah's speech, which is eternal, and what else? Muslims say the Quran can't be changed, don't they? We know that it can. We know that it has been, right? But set that aside. They say the Quran is eternal and it's immutable, unchanging, right? Doesn't this sound like what we mean by God? Eternal, unchangeable, right? They claim the Quran is exhaustively detailed. It tells us everything, right? The Quran makes that claim repeatedly. So now the Quran sounds like it's almost being portrayed as this source of omniscient knowledge. I mean, on and on we could go. Moreover, there are Islamic sources that even talk about the Quran as though it were a person, right? Remember, there are hadiths that talk about the Quran on the day of resurrection interceding for Muslims. So because Muslims spend time memorizing it, reciting it, the Quran is called their companion. So it says that their companion will appear on the day of resurrection as a pale man and will intercede for them. So now you've got this thing that will appear as a man, has the power to speak and intercede. It's eternal. It's immutable. I mean, it's just another deity, right? And they don't have to, they don't have to use that terminology. They don't have to call it a person, but if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, well, then it's probably a duck, right? I mean,
so same person who says the attributes are not identical to Allah's essence, they are distinct from His essence, also say distinctions don't imply divisions.
Okay, so let's grant that for a moment, right? Now, what is he doing? What does that sound like he's doing? Okay, remember, Muslims are the ones who reject the doctrine of the Trinity as shirk and polytheism. But do Christians think that the persons of the Trinity are separate from each other essentially, or that they are personally distinct? Right? We believe the persons of the Trinity are personally distinct, but Muslims say that's shirk. Well, if this Muslim, to protect Islam from being a religion of shirk, thinks it's adequate to say the attributes are distinct, not separate, well, then he has to grant that the Trinity is monotheistic. But no Muslim wants to do that, right? The Quran claims that Christians are polytheists in one way or another. So That's not a safe move for the Muslims. Right now, they're playing into our court, and now we need to ask other questions about this. Now, first of all, that's just not how the Islamic source is presented. I'm being magnanimous here. I'm being gracious to say, okay, distinct, not separate. The Quran is clearly separate from Allah, right? Anybody who thinks it isn't has a problem. If you don't think that this book is separate from your God, it's just distinct from him, and that's supposed to mean something, we've got some huge problems. So right now I'm handling, something that's not separate from your deity. Really? Really? I mean, a Muslim, clearly needs to think through the implications of that. If you think I'm holding your God with my hands, then you've got some serious problems. And moreover, if I mean, there's just a myriad of problems that result from this sort of thing. So imagine, for example, sometimes Muslims will say it's not the written text, it's the recitation, right? So I mean, this is one of the maneuvers they try and make to say the Quran hasn't been corrupted. Even if the manuscripts show variance, it's been preserved in the memories, right? So if we go to the oral recitation of Muslims, do Muslims always get the oral recitation right? So when Muslims butcher the recitation, are they butchering their deity? Right? I mean, again, innumerable problems result from trying to rescue Allah from the conundrum that they're reduced to by trying to claim that he's absolutely one when he really isn't. Okay? The Quran is something other than Allah. His attributes are not he. According to Al-Ashari, his attributes are not he. Okay, if they're not he, well, they're something other than he. So yeah, I don't think that works.
Okay, that was, but good try. So Muslims, please do continue try. Okay, I'll let you continue.
Okay, so pardon me, I thought you were going to talk, so I took this bite of something.
Oh,
I forgot to eat before the show,
sorry.
so I'm making sure I don't pass out somewhere along the way. No, I'm fine. So I want to look at the sources now. I've basically just given kind of a historical breakdown, and this represents the different schools of thought that now exist in Islam. But remember, the earliest school was the traditionists, those who affirm that Allah has these attributes. They're independently existing things. They include physical parts. Now, they may not use the word physical, but that's when you look at the references to Allah's form, his shape, and I'm going to read some sources here momentarily that talk about Allah touching people and stuff like that. It's quite obvious that we're talking about something palpable here, something tangible. But one of the things that I want to do before looking at this, because this is what inevitably happens, okay, I need to anticipate something because Muslims always want to bring up the Bible, right? And now, even though I'm going to say something about this, Muslims are still going to do it, right? They can't help themselves. But number one, we're talking about the Islamic sources. It's irrelevant what the Bible says, right? It does not. If you're in a sinking boat, right, and there's somebody else in another boat that points this out to you, right? You're passing by a boat, your boat's sinking, and somebody in the other boat says, "You're sinking, you're sinking." It doesn't do you any good to say, "Well, your boat's sinking too," right? You're still sinking. Okay. Now, I don't believe that Christians are in a sinking boat. I'm just trying to give an analogy here that will hopefully help Muslims see why it's irrelevant to bring up the Bible. It doesn't matter what you think the Bible teaches or how much you don't like the Bible, right? It doesn't matter how much you hate the Christ of Scripture or the gospel of Christ or any of those things. That's not going to rescue the Quran, okay? But the reason they bring up the Bible is because they think the Bible also attributes these kinds of things to God. They think that it says God has face, hands, and so forth. Okay. And they think then when I read the Quran or the Islamic sources, I'm not being fair when I say that it teaches these things if I don't think that the Bible teaches these things. So let me clarify this. It is true that the Bible uses certain figures of speech for God, okay, that include references to things like hands, right? For example, Psalm 19 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands." Okay. Psalm 91 talks about God covering people or protecting them under his feathers, right? This is all poetic imagery. It's all found in poetry. None of it is intended in any kind of literal sense, right? That's why Jews and Christians have just never taken it that way. That's not how poetry is supposed to be read. The same kind of language is used for people elsewhere, even though people don't have feathers, right? Jesus said to Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who stone the prophets, and kill those who are sent to you, how often I wanted to gather you together like a hen gathers her chicks under its wings, right? We don't think Jesus is a chicken with wings, right? This is an idiomatic, metaphorical expression. And like I said, the vast majority of times you find this sort of thing, it's in the poetic literature of the Old Testament. And even those rare occasions outside of it, it's usually quite evident in context that it's an idiom. Okay. So I recognize the use of idioms. When I started looking at the Quran and running across some statements, I used to think at first that it was doing the same kind of thing you find in the Bible. I used to think that if you run across a reference to Allah's eyes or his hands, that it was just saying the same sort of thing, right? These are just figures of speech. It's not to be taken literally. But here's what started getting to me. This is the first verse that really started getting me thinking. Okay. You're familiar with the numerous times in the Quran where it talks about the angels being commanded to bow down to Satan, right? So the angels are commanded to bow down to Satan, but I mean, excuse me, to Adam, but Satan refuses, right? Now think about this, even before getting to the body parts here. Uh, Satan objects to bowing down to Adam. Now remember, according to the Quran, you can't prostrate to anyone but Allah. It's shirk, right? So Satan, in effect, is refusing to commit shirk. According to Islamic standards, right? You can't bow down to anyone but Allah. But here is Allah commanding shirk. Here's Satan resisting this command to commit shirk. But now, why would Allah command people to bow down to Adam? Angels, Satan, and so forth. Uh, and what is it about Adam that makes him so special? What is it that makes him a fit object of prostration or worship? According to Surah 38:75, we're given the reason. In Surah 38:75, Allah says, "How can you refuse to bow down to somebody that I created with my own two hands?" Okay. Now, notice a couple of things here. Number one, Allah says, "Someone I created with my hands." Okay. But he also says two hands, so it's very specific. It makes it quite precise, right? And moreover, it says my own two hands, so it's emphasized. Okay. Allah is saying, this is the reason you should have bowed down to Adam. I created him with my own two hands. So think this through. Elsewhere in the Quran, we're told that Allah created all sorts of things, everything, right? But the way he created things was simply by speaking, simply by saying the word be. But Adam here is being singled out. He's being especially addressed as one that Allah created with his own two hands. Okay. If the Quran is not saying that Allah created Adam in some unique way, namely with his own two hands, but it was created in the same way as everything else, then there would be nothing special about Adam. There would be no reason why Satan should bow down to Adam rather than everything, right? If this is just an idiom, right? Allah created him with his two hands. If that's just an idiom for how Allah creates, well, then it would be grounds for prostrating to everything, right? I mean, I'm hoping the listeners are following through with this. If creating Adam with his two hands just means that he said be, like he said with respect to everything else, and this is the reason why Satan is supposed to bow down to him, then he should also bow down to everything else, because everything would have been made by Allah in this fashion, right? There has to be something about this that's special and unique to Adam. Now, when you look at the hadiths are explicit, they're clear that Adam was a unique object of creation. He was uniquely created with Allah's hands. According to the hadiths, Allah created only four things with his hands, or did four things directly with his hands. They say he created Adam with his own two hands. He planted the trees of the Garden of Eden with his own hands, so he got soil underneath his fingertips, apparently. Maybe poked himself with a couple of thorns along the way. Third, we're told that he created the pen directly, and he wrote the Torah with his own two hands. In fact, there are even some sources that say that he was kicking back on a rock, and you could hear the screech of the quill as he was writing. Okay, so that's number one. The Islamic sources say there were four things that Allah created directly with his own hands. So there's something special about how Allah created Adam that distinguishes him from everything else. Moreover, there's a mass narrated hadith. It's a mutawatir hadith where it talks about people on the day of judgment going to various people hoping that they will intercede with Allah for them, right? And each person that they go to was a alleged prophet from the past, and each prophet turns them away, saying, "I'm not worthy, go to somebody else," right? So they first go to Adam, and he says, "I'm not worthy, I sinned, go to Noah." They go to Noah, he says, "I'm not worthy, I sinned, go to Abraham." Abraham says, "I'm not worthy, go to Moses," and so on down the line. And then you come to Jesus. And what's interesting in the hadith is Jesus doesn't say, "I sinned," because of course Jesus didn't sin, right? According to the Quran or the hadith, he never sinned. Uh, but he does say, "Don't go to me, go to Muhammad," right? According to the hadith. So there's no real good reason why Jesus couldn't have interceded based on the logic of the hadith. It's just this gaping hole there for why he would turn people away when he's the only one who's sinless in this whole chain of people. But here's the point. Everybody in this chain of prophets has something special about him that the people think makes them worthy to intercede with Allah and give them a favorable reply, right? So, for example, the reason they go to Jesus, according to the hadith, is because he is Allah's word and a spirit from him. So that's what made Jesus special. That's why they thought he could intercede with Allah. Okay. The reason they went to Moses is because Moses was someone whom Allah spoke to directly. Okay. So it says they went to Moses, right? Because he's the one to whom Allah spoke directly. So that's what made Moses special. The reason they went to Abraham is because he was called the friend of Allah, right? So that makes him special. Guess why they went to Adam? Why did they think Adam was so special? Why did they think Adam would have some pull with Allah?
He's created by his hand.
He was created with Allah's own two hands. Now, there's another hadith, right? Really, there's several different hadiths, and when you put them together, you see the logic of what's going on. But these other hadiths, and by the way, I'll give you a link to the article where a lot of this information I put down on Answering Islam. I have an article on a lot of this. I'm about to bring out some other material I don't have anything online for, but this is all on answeringislam.org. And I think the article is called Allah's Hands, More Than a Handful of Evidence. So there's this hadith where Muhammad says that Adam and Moses once got into an argument. Okay, so Moses meets Adam and he says, "Are you that Adam who got us turned out of paradise?" Right? In other words, you're the guy who's, it's all your fault. By the way, doesn't that sound like Moses, according to the hadith, thinks that there's something like original sin,
Yeah.
right? Moses is saying, you're the one that's responsible for all of this. We all got kicked out of paradise because of you, right? But in the hadith, Moses says, are you that Adam that got us kicked out of paradise, even though Allah created you with his own two hands, right? Then, now you might think that Moses got the better of this exchange, but not according to the hadith. Adam actually, gets the best of Moses here, because Adam says, "Are you that Moses that had the Torah, that Allah?" Hold on, I'm going to skip a part of this hadith just for this point. He says, "Are you that Moses that was given the Torah that had been written 40 years before my creation?" In other words, the point of the hadith is, it was already written before I ever sinned in the Torah that you were given. So you knew that my fate was already written, so don't blame me, right? So now Adam's actually blaming God, right? He's blaming God for this. But guess how the hadith, the whole thing reads? It says, "Are you that Moses that was given the Torah that Allah wrote with his own hand?" Right? So the whole point of the hadith is that each one is accusing the other and saying they're especially guilty, even though they were in some way special in association with something Allah did with his hands, right? Now we have other hadiths that say things like, when Allah created Adam, he stroked his back and brought out of his back all of his future descendants and made them stand before him and confess that he's the only God. Right now, a lot of people, you've heard of fitra.
Yeah.
Muslims will often talk about fitra. They say that we have this inborn knowledge of God. And all of that sounds nice if you don't know what Muslims really mean by that. As Christians, we would all say that everybody has an inescapable knowledge of God, and therefore no excuse for not believing in him, right? We say that because we say that man is made in the image of God, right? As God's image bearer, surrounded by God's revelation, it is inescapable for man to know God in some sense, right? We see the evidence of his handiwork all around us, right? And even our own consciences bear witness to his existence. That's why our consciences accuse us when we do wrong and excuse us when we do right. We know right from wrong. We know our Creator. We know what he expects. So that's what we mean when we say that people have an innate, inborn knowledge of God. But Muslims actually think people know that God exists because God actually took us out of Adam's body before he ever created us. After creating Adam, he stroked Adam's back, got out his descendants, and told them he's the only God. Then he put everyone back in Adam's loins, right, so that we would eventually be born. Now, think about this for a second, by the way. Why would Allah stroke Adam's back in order to get out his descendants? Where does the Quran think that semen originates?
From
Right?
the ribs.
Yeah, between the backbone and the ribs.
Yeah.
So here's Allah using his expert knowledge of the human
Biology.
body, how things work, stroking Adam's back, giving him a massage, right? So Allah was the first masseuse in history, the first massage therapist. And so, I mean, I could go on and on with these hadiths. This is why it's inescapable that the earliest Muslims would have believed that Allah actually has hands. And the same thing can be duplicated for all of these other attributes.
So,
Okay.
here's a comment. Who says Allah don't and cannot have hands? But we say that we know in which sense, we say that we don't know which sense they are hands. Remember, Quran says Allah has power over everything.
Okay. So,
So Allah
first
has
of all,
hands,
that's
but we don't know what kind of hands. Like we don't know if he kind of needs to put nail polish on his nails, or if he's got like 5 fingers, 6 fingers. I don't know,
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
or bigger than me, stronger than me, I don't know.
yeah, I mean, Muslims, they only pull the wool over their own eyes with this, right? Uh, what they're saying is, we want to say that he has hands, but we don't want to deal with the difficulties that creates. So we'll just say we don't know how. But that doesn't help you. It doesn't matter what kind of hands. Muslims will often say things like the foot of an elephant is different from the foot of a man, right? And so Allah, his foot is different than the foot of an elephant and the foot of a man. So what? I mean, if that's your view, it's still a foot of some sort, right? It doesn't help you to say that there are different kinds of feet, right? If your God has a foot, and it doesn't matter how deformed it looks, it doesn't matter how pretty it might look, it doesn't matter anything uh, relevant to the issue. He has an appendage, he has a part that compromises the claim of Muslims that Allah's absolutely one, and it strikes at the very heart of the claim that he created the universe. If he created space, matter, and time, what in the world is he doing with a foot? And where did that foot exist before heaven and earth existed? Right? I mean, this is just, it's a problem. So normally, what Muslims will say, and I think this is what the commenter is, I think this is what is behind this comment. Ordinarily, what they say is they'll appeal to Surah 42:11 and Surah 112:4, where it says there's nothing like him and nothing that can be compared with him. Right now, there are several problems with this. Uh, Number one, as I already said, if all you're saying is Allah has hands that are unique hands, right? Uh, just like man's hands are unique from the hands of of an animal, and Allah has unique hands besides. You're still saying he has hands, and it doesn't get you out of the problem. Uh, but two, I mean, you certainly can't say, "Oh yeah, I like that hadith." Allah, the first person he'll shake hands with on the day of resurrection is or will be Umar. Like I said, I mean, it goes on and on, right? I mean, the evidence. Another hadith I didn't bring up is the one where Allah places his palm between Muhammad's shoulder blades, and then it says Muhammad felt its coolness in his chest. So notice Allah's hand fit between Muhammad's two shoulder blades, so it can't be that big, or maybe he can blow it up bigger on occasion. I don't know, but it fit between Muhammad's shoulder blades, and Muhammad felt it. So we're not talking about some mystical hands here. We're talking about hands that can touch, that can be felt, and so forth. Um, but the other thing is, so think about this. So some Muslims will try to use these passages to say hands don't really mean hands, right? They're not just saying he has hands, but we don't know how. They're saying he doesn't really have hands because there's nothing like him, right? That's how some Muslims use these
Yeah.
passages. But these passages don't prove that at all. Okay. In the first place, it's just bad hermeneutically as a method to take two passages and reject the rest, right? To say these two passages say this, and we interpret them this way, so that means all these other passages don't mean what they seem to clearly say. That's bad methodologically, because it's more likely that you'll misunderstand a couple of texts than that you'll misunderstand a whole bunch of texts. Right? A bunch of texts speaking to an issue provide clarity on an issue, something that one or two passages lack. And so that's just bad methodologically. But two, think about this. The Quran also says that the believing women are not like the unbelieving women, right? You've heard that expression. Do you
Yeah.
think Muhammad was seriously saying that the believing women do not have hands? Do you think he was saying they don't have feet and shin and so forth, and other women do? No, that's just absurd. When he's saying they're not like them, the point of comparison is relative. It's not absolute, right? He's just saying there's a difference between them in this way. The believing women are pious, right? They are righteous. That's his claim. We don't, necessarily agree with that. But he's certainly not saying that the kind of being they have is altogether different from any other kind of being. Similarly, these passages of the Quran are not saying that Allah doesn't have uh, hands and feet and so forth. It's just saying that uh, there's something about Allah that's unique. But now think about this. It gets even worse. When you look at these passages and actually try and make sense out of what they're talking about, you quickly find out that um, they're not even talking about the issue that Muslims think they're talking about. Um, so I'm actually trying to pull this up here real quick. Let me just pull up Surah 42 for a moment. Um,
42:11.
yeah. So if you have it pulled up, you could cite it for me.
He is the creator of heavens and the earth. He has made for you from yourself mates, and among the cattle's mates he multiplies you thereby. There is nothing like unto him, and he is the hear and seer.
Okay. So notice what's going on there in the verse. It says that Allah created everything and its mate. He created everything in pairs, right? So you have male, you have female, of men, of apes, of donkeys, whatever, right? Everything has its mate, okay? But then when it talks about Allah, it says there's nothing like him, meaning he does not have a mate. He does not have a corresponding partner, okay? It is not talking about Allah's attributes, that he doesn't have attributes, or that his attributes are it's not saying he doesn't have hands, feet, face, and so forth. It's saying there's not a female Allah. And that actually fits in with the argument made elsewhere in the Quran where it says Allah doesn't have a son or daughters because Allah doesn't have a spouse, right? But remember, all those arguments presuppose that if Allah had a spouse, then he could have a son, right? I mean, repeatedly, the Quran says he doesn't have a son precisely because he doesn't have a spouse. And that's the whole point that's being made in Surah 42. It's not saying Allah doesn't have hands. It's not saying he doesn't have feet. It's saying he doesn't have a mate. There's not another one like him, right? There's no female Allah up there with him. So this argument doesn't work. Now look at Surah 112 as well, and you'll see it's the same issue that's being stated there. When it says there's nothing that can be compared with him, it's not saying Allah has no attributes or Allah doesn't have face, eyes, hands, and so forth. Rather, it's saying that Allah doesn't have a mate with whom he can beget a child. Okay? In fact, read the whole surah, all 4 verses.
Sorry, just coming, just a second.
Yeah, it's a very short surah, so we can read the whole thing.
Say, He is Allah, one, and verse 2. Sorry, I just thought it will be nice to show it on the screen. Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begots or is born. Nor is there to him any equivalent. There is nothing like him.
Right. So did you notice that? It says he does not beget, nor is he begotten. So the issue in the psalm is, or excuse me, the surah, the issue in the surah is that Allah has no offspring, right? He has no equal, no counterpart, nobody with whom he can produce or sire a child. And so the issue again is not that Allah doesn't have attributes, not that he doesn't have face, eyes, and hands. He just doesn't have, he hasn't met the right woman. That's what it's saying. That's all the surah is really saying. In fact, it cannot be saying, listen to this, it cannot be saying that Allah doesn't have the sorts of qualities that I've been talking about for this reason, among others. according to the historical setting of this psalm, or I keep saying psalm, I'm
Surah.
used to saying psalm more than I'm used to saying surah. I guess that's a good thing, right? um, but the
Setting of the surah.
yeah, the setting of the surah. Remember that Muslims say that this is part of the science of interpreting the Quran. You need to know the occasion of revelation. Why was this surah given? What was it in response to? What was the context of it? Now, that's all kind of weird to begin with because the Quran's supposed to be eternal. So I don't know why we're looking for a historical context for a book that's eternal. But let's just play along here for a minute. We always have to play along, don't we, with Muslims and pretend that we don't know something else. Well, in this case, the occasion is supposedly and there's actually several sets of narrations that talk about different things that gave rise to this surah. But we're told that certain pagans came to Muhammad and said to him, "What is your Lord made of?" Okay, who is your Lord and what is he made of? Okay, they wanted to know if Allah was, remember they're idolaters, right? The pagans are idolaters. They think in terms of physical idols. Now, it doesn't mean the pagans didn't. I mean, it doesn't mean they didn't believe their deities existed apart from their idols, but the reason they had these physical representations of their gods is because they thought their gods could be physically represented because they had physical features, right? So when they're asking Muhammad, what is your Allah made of? They're asking Muhammad to tell them, about this deity, whether he's solid or not, and so forth. And what is that material? If you look at Surah 112 again, in fact, I should have, if I knew we were going to talk about this particular passage, I didn't know exactly what I'd bring up. I never know what I'm going to say before I say it.
That's fine.
But if people will look on islamawakened.com, islamawakened.com, okay, this is one of my favorite sites. And if you go to the upper column, it has a link which says Quran. Now, when you put your mouse over it, it'll pull a tab up. I mean, a scroll down tab. I'm sorry, somebody's calling me apparently. So if you go to it, it has a scroll down tab. But I don't want you to. I just want you to press Quran, not go down the tabs there. Just press Quran at the top. And if you press Quran, hold on. Sorry about this. All right. That was kind of rude of somebody. I think I can put my computer on do not disturb if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. I'll have to figure that out later. Anyways, so you go to Quran, and then if you look there, you'll notice that it has all the surahs, right, with the different verses. If you scroll all the way down to Surah 112, okay, so the second to last, or excuse me, the third to last one, and you press on verse 2. Okay, so some translations will say he is Allah, the one, the eternal, right? That's the eternal is what's sometimes translated in verse 2.
God
But if
the
you look at the
eternal. Yeah, God
huh?
the eternal, the
Right.
uncaused cause of all being.
Right. Now look down these translations. I want you to notice something. The translation changes repeatedly. Some of them say eternal, some of them say sustainer, some of them say self-sufficient. All these words mean something different, okay? T.B. Irving says God is the source for everything. That doesn't mean the same thing as eternal, right? Safi Kaskas says eternal, but Wahiduddin Khan says it means the self-sufficient one. Dr. Lali Bakhtiar says it means the everlasting refuge. Dr. Kamal Omar says it means the independent and the one sought by everything. Itani says it means God the absolute. On and on we could go, giving you different translations. Why in the world do all of these translations give you a different meaning? Okay, that's the question people should be asking themselves when they see this sort of thing. Well, now, if you go down the page to the translation by Bijan Moinian, you have a hint here of what might be going on. Okay. This is a Muslim translation. Okay. This is not a Orientalist. It's not a, Christian. This is a Muslim translation. Okay. He says, so Bijan Moinian, it's spelled Bijan. Here's how he translates it. Allah is solid. Allah is solid. What in the world is that all about? Right? Now remember the historical context. The pagans came to Muhammad and said, what is your Lord made? Right? What does he consist of? Now, here I got to give you a little bit more background. According to um, some, certain pagans, they had these, some of these weird ideas that go along with their paganism. Some of their deities were hollow, right? They had cavities, hollow places inside of them. Okay, and so they, in other words, some of their deities were not considered solid, right? Like man. Man has cavities in his body, right? We have a chest cavity. We have, various, stomach cavity. And this is what allows for certain things, right? It allows for the entry of food. It allows for us to speak. Well, if you look at, there's a interesting, there's an interesting series of narrations in Al-Tabari where he talks about this sort of thing. And I'll just give you the gist of this. Al-Tabari, well, first of all, let me tell you this. Al-Tabari gives us a list of all sorts of people have discussed among Muslims the meaning of the word translated in Surah 112:2. Okay, what does it mean? There's all kinds of debate among Muslims. But the reason there's debate among Muslims is because they don't like the idea that it means solid. Okay, it's not that there's not a good basis for knowing what it means. It's that they don't like what that suggests, and so they look around for different meanings. Al-Tabari gives us something like 14 different opinions on the meaning of that word. But the one that has the best evidence, it actually has a chain of narrations back to Muhammad, according to Al-Tabari, is the meaning solid. Allah is solid, meaning he's not hollow. Okay? He is not hollow. Now, moreover, here is something Al-Tabari tells us. Now put this picture together. It goes back to a lot of what we've said already. Al-Tabari tells us that when Allah created Adam, he first of all created him like a lifeless statue. Okay, and he caused this statue of Adam to stand for 40 years before he breathed life into it. Okay, now one day during this 40-year period where this statue is just standing there, the angels stumbled upon it. Okay, the angels come across this statue and they're afraid, right? Suddenly they're struck with fear. Okay, now the question you should be asking yourself is, why are they afraid? What are they afraid of? Right? They're angels. Why would this statue make them afraid? Well, Satan is with them. It's funny how Satan's always with the angels, isn't it? Muslims say he's not an angel. Actually, the Islamic sources don't teach that. But anyways, Satan says to the angels, this is my paraphrase, look, fellas, I'm going to go over there and investigate, and then I'll come back over here and tell you what I find out, right? So we're told that Satan goes over to this statue of Adam, this unidentified thing, and it says that he entered in through the mouth and exited through his rear end. Okay? This is Al-Tabari. I'm not making this up, right? And then he comes back to the angels and he says, don't worry, your Lord is solid, but that is hollow. Okay, what is Satan saying here? In other words, the whole point is they see this statue of Adam, they think it's Allah. But Satan goes over, and because he's able to enter through its mouth and exit through its rear, he discovers that it's hollow and therefore cannot be Allah, because Allah is not hollow, Allah is solid. Right? This was a pagan belief. It was a belief that Muhammad shared with his pagan countrymen. He didn't differ with them on this issue. It's found in Surah 112, and it's found in all sorts of hadiths and al-Tabari and so forth. So, but my point here with all of this is Surah 112 does not help Muslims claim that Allah doesn't have a body and hands and feet and so forth. What it's saying is Allah is solid. He doesn't have a companion. So there's nothing like him. There's no other spouse. And so he can't produce offspring. That's all it's saying. It's not saying anything like no attributes, certainly not no hands, no feet, no shin, no eyes.
The story which statues of Adam, which waits for 40 years. Do you think so when it says like Torah was written 40 years before Adam, is that is the Torah written like before that, or is the Torah written after Allah give life to Adam?
Yeah, it'd be before he gave life to him. But now that you bring that up, it actually shows us that, Allah didn't use his hands very much, but when he did, he was very busy, because this makes the creation of that statue with his hands coincide with the writing of the Torah and planting the trees of the Garden of Eden. So it's like he got really tired and,
Multitask.
yeah, he had to, it's like all this labor, I better, maybe he got calluses and or blisters or something. And he's been nursing his wounds ever since.
Sorry.
I never mean to make you laugh. But it gives me a chance to drink some coffee.
Okay, so now we've got all those things, and we put together what it means, or we try to put together what it means there is nothing like Allah. And we talked about hands of Allah and how it's called, all those kind of things, but we couldn't figure out, like, I guess his hands are as big as our hands, because if he's able to touch the shoulder of Muhammad, it can't be like too big. Like if Muhammad feels that, maybe just like 4 fingers or different way of that. Okay.
I mean, I think that makes some things easier, when, if you can imagine, like when you want to get a gift for somebody, especially if it's clothes, you need to know what size they are, right? So let's say a Muslim wants to appear on the day of resurrection with a nice pair of knitted gloves for Allah. It helps. Because the Islamic sources are pretty detailed, aren't they, about everything to do with Muhammad? So we have a good idea of how broad his shoulders were and stuff like that. Here's the Shama'il-Tirmidhi, where he collects narrations about Muhammad's physical features, the hairy mole on his back that he thought proved his prophethood, right? The physical
Isaiah
deformity.
9, apparently.
Yeah. So we have a pretty good idea. So if people want to think ahead, be forward thinkers, it helps them know, maybe some kind of gloves for Allah, or
and also someone just brought up the story where Adam says to Allah, finish me before it's too late, before sun sets. It takes time. It takes time for Allah to do lots of things. And poor Adam, like, first he doesn't even know very basics, but he know sun is about to set and people don't work when sun sets. But anyway, sorry for distraction. Okay. So where are we now?
Well, I don't know if there are any other questions, but I could always move on. Actually, so let's see here. Um, we could easily talk about evidence. I always like to start with the evidence for Allah's hands, just because the Islamic sources say a lot more about Allah's hands than anything else,
Sure.
right? But and so that, I mean, the more evidence you have, the clearer you're able to make something. But I've been keeping a list, and I haven't actually kept up on it lately. This is, I don't remember when I started keeping this list, but I have here a list of things. So, for example, things on Allah's image, form, shape, and height. I have things on his face, his eyes, his ears. Some Islamic sources even talk about Allah as a beardless youth. Um, I've seen things on Allah's arms and elbows, but I forgot to put them down in my notes. But I have hadiths on Allah's hands, fingers, and palms, references in the Quran and the hadith to Allah's back, side, and waist. Of course, everybody knows that Allah has a shin. That's probably one of Allah's most famous attributes. I mean, it's interesting because his hands are what he always wants to talk about, right? Uh, but his shin gets a lot more press. His shin gets mentioned more often.
Why
Uh,
is that?
well, yeah, I think um, I think because, well, I mean, I mean, one thing is it when you read the hadiths, you get the impression that it's an especially beautiful shin, right? Not because they're very descriptive about Allah's shin, but because what happens, again, this goes back to the hadiths talking about the day of resurrection, right? So, uh, according to the sources, what's going to happen, the day of resurrection is going to be an extremely long time, right? People are going to be standing in this plain naked. Everybody's going to be naked, right? Here's the modest religion of Islam. Every single person who's ever lived is going to be standing there naked, right? Men and women and so forth. Um, so no women in their hijabs or anything else. They're just going to be standing out there. Everybody's going to be barefoot and all this for 50,000 years, by the way, around that, right? And people are going to get really, really anxious about judgment, right? If you're imagine it's kind of like, you go to court. Let's say you got a speeding ticket and you're out there waiting for the judge to come. You're hoping for this to hurry up so you can take care of this, right? But the longer it takes, the more bothersome it becomes. Well, imagine, you're going to stand before God and you're going to answer for everything. And of course, we're not talking about the true God here, but in their minds, that's what they're thinking. It's the true God, and he's going to judge them. And they don't know that he really loves them because the Islamic sources don't give them that kind of assurance. Allah's just not that kind of God. And so they're really worried about what's going to happen. And so one of the things that will eventually happen is Allah is going to appear in something other than his true form. Okay, so he's going to shapeshift, okay, into something else. He's going to be like a disguise artist, right? Like one of those guys that puts on fake noses and puts on a wig and stuff like that.
Yeah, but
So Allah's going to,
why do you need that on the day of resurrection? Like everything is kind of done. Why Allah needs to deceive people or reveal himself in different forms in the
well,
day
it's
of resurrection?
probably just to keep in character, right? He's been deceiving throughout history, so maybe it's just he wants to keep it up. I mean, I don't know, but I mean, well, in the Hadith, the idea is that the people who only worship Allah are going to refuse to bow down and worship him because he's not appearing in his true form. Okay, so at first, this group is removed, then that group is removed until the last group that remains is only Muslims, right? And then it says Allah will appear to them at first in one of these other forms, and they're going to refuse to worship him. But then it says he's going to appear to them in his true form, and it says he will reveal his shin to them, and then they will prostrate to him, right? So I think the reason this gets addressed so much is because, the way the Hadith puts this, it's like, I mean, who thinks of a shin being the thing that just especially proves to you that this is Allah? how in the world is that going to be so striking to people? Oh, obviously this is the true God right here. Look at that shin, right? That's just bizarre. So that's one reason I think people bring this up. Um,
And he's like
but
uncovering that, and then we used
yeah,
to ask at the corner like, does Allah shave his shin, those kind of things, but it didn't go well.
mm-mm. No, I mean, now, I wouldn't put anything, I wouldn't put anything past the Islamic sources. I mean, we're making good fun of it, but oftentimes something I think is laughable as a implication of something, and then I look in the Islamic sources and I think, my goodness, they do say this, right? So, for example, if Allah has these descriptions and he's got this beautiful shin, then you might think that Allah would veil himself like a woman would. And the Islamic sources do talk about Allah being behind a veil, right?
Yeah.
So he has, there is a veil. And so I wouldn't put it past the sources to say that Allah shaves his shin. After all, like I said, there are some Islamic sources that talk about Allah being a beardless youth. Okay, there are actually sources. Now, those particular hadiths are, of course, rejected by Muslims. They really hate those hadiths, but they're still out there, right? And all the other hadiths I've been talking about are sound narrations, by the way, right? The day of resurrection stuff, Allah creating Adam with his two hands, stroking Adam's back, only creating four things with his own hands, the argument between Adam and Moses about Allah, creating him with his hands and writing the Torah with his hand, all that stuff is unobjectionable narrations. But there's other stuff that even some Muslims are uncomfortable with, but other Muslims weren't. Other Muslims talk about Allah having these things. And by the way, the Quran also says that Allah has a house. I mean, not the Quran. The Hadith
Yeah.
mentions that Allah
He
Allah
looks
has a
from the
house.
balcony.
Yeah, yeah. So he struts around his balcony with his ravishing shins, and yeah. I mean,
So with all those body parts, uh, like I know it's not funny, but like it's funny in a sense, like funny yet not funny. Uh, what does it say to us about Allah and like all this? There is nothing like him. He's all one. Just doesn't make that much sense to me.
no, no. That's the issue. Now, one thing I'd say that might be worthwhile for people is remember that Muhammad was it was kind of like a buffet, right? I don't know if do they have buffets over there in the UK?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I imagine there are buffets all over the world, but I had to make sure I wasn't using something that people don't know about. So at a buffet, right? You can go in there and you can pick whatever you want,
Yeah.
right? I like that. I don't like that. Pass. I'll take this. Well, that was kind of the way it was for Muhammad. It was a sort of buffet. He was making his own religion, right? So he grew up with the pagans. He did pagan things. He picked up things from them, even though he was going to reject some things. But we still find all sorts of paganism in the Quran. He heard the Jews. He liked some of what they were saying. He heard the Christians. He liked some of what they were saying. He picked up things from Zoroastrianism and these other groups. And because he's doing that, he ends up including in the Quran conflicting things that don't fit together, right? Paganism doesn't mix with Christianity and Judaism. And even the Judaism that he's incorporating into the Quran wasn't pure Judaism. We're not talking here about just Old Testament religion. We're talking about people long after the time of Christ who had developed all these traditions, right? The Talmud and all of that stuff. And even some of the Christian material was apocryphal material, not even authentic, Christian stuff. So he's learning fables and other things. And so this is bound to create problems if you're not paying attention. I liken it to if you've been in the water before and you have a volleyball or a beach ball and you push it under the water, right? Because it has air in it, it's trying to get to the surface.
So you can hold it under the water, but if you accidentally move your hands, it'll bounce, it'll shoot up and hit you in the face, right? Well, Muhammad's including all this stuff in the Quran, and a lot of it ends up, pushing to the surface and bopping Muslims in the nose. And so I give you an example. Everybody has heard Muslims claim that Allah can't enter into his creation, right? That's why they say Jesus couldn't be God. He couldn't be God incarnate because Allah can't enter into his creation. That's beneath him, right? Well, I think everybody also knows that the Quran includes references to Allah speaking to Moses from the right side of Mount Sinai, right? He incorporated that story from the Torah into the Quran. So Surah 19, Surah 20, Surah 27, Surah 28 all include references to Allah speaking to Moses. So you have this problem. If Muhammad's teachings really do lead us to the conclusion that Allah can't enter into his creation, that's why he's got to, use Gabriel. That's why he had to hire Gabriel and say, hey, will you be my liaison, the guy that talks to others for me, because I can't do it, right? I need an inside man that can do it. Well, if that's the case, then why do we have these stories of Allah speaking to Moses? So these are two things that don't go together. Allah can't enter into his creation. Allah did enter into his creation and spoke to Moses. So that's not the only thing you get in the Quran. So you get Muhammad trying to claim all sorts of things that he ends up contradicting because of this other material that he's grafting in. And that goes for the issue of Allah's attributes. He claims that Allah is absolutely one. But really, I mean, when you look at it, all the Quran is saying when it talks about Allah being one is it's just saying all these other pagan deities don't exist. Again, Muslims are the ones who are pushing the Quran beyond its limits. They're the ones pretending that he's absolutely one. The Islamic sources do not teach that he doesn't have parts. They don't, right? They teach that he has all these parts. They're only saying that Allah doesn't, Allah never got lucky. Allah never met a woman like him that he wanted to spend all of his time with. So, I mean, it's if they weren't busy trying to claim things for their Quran that just aren't true, they wouldn't have some of the problems, but they would still have a whole bunch of problems, right? I mean, it's still a problem to say Allah has these separately existing parts that are something other than him, right? That can exist independently of him, like this thing.
Speech Quran, yeah. So couple of comments and kind of questions. As we talked about Allah's hands, his fingers, all those kind of things. Comment is, but your God writes with his fingers in Exodus on the tablet. So why are you talking about fingers of Allah?
Why does everybody have to fulfill my words as if they're trying to prove I'm a prophet and even a better one than Muhammad? Because I say things that happen. Muhammad said things that didn't happen. I said at the beginning of the broadcast, I always have to begin with this because inevitably you get people that don't listen and aren't especially, and I'm not trying to be mean here, I just want the person to really get this. They're not especially good thinkers or deep thinkers. I stated at the beginning, number one, remember the analogy of the sinking ship. If you are in a boat and you're passing another boat and the person on the other boat tells you, hey, your boat is sinking, it won't do you any good to say, oh yeah, your boat's sinking too. You better start doing something to rescue yourself. If that's a sinking ship, it doesn't matter how many other sinking ships there are in the world, you're still sinking. So even if it were the case that the Bible presents God as having these sorts of features, it doesn't help Muslims. Okay? They have to defend their own book. They can't simply engage in the fallacious tu quo que fallacy, right? You too. That's what that basically means in logic, that a person's saying, oh yeah, you got the same problem. Imagine somebody coming to my door and saying, we think you're guilty of murder and we're going to bring you up on charges. And then I say, oh yeah, well, you're guilty of murder too. What good is that going to do me? If I don't have any better defense, then I'm going to prison or I'm going to be executed, right? Doesn't matter if the other person did that too. Okay. But I also pointed out that the Bible uses figures of speech. Okay? There's a clear difference when the Bible uses figures of speech and when the Quran uses things literally. Okay? I gave copious evidence that the Quran and Hadith are using these things literally. You cannot say that these are simply figures of speech. One thing I didn't mention, just for the sake of time, and that's the one that actually addresses Exodus, is the Bible teaches that God, although infinite, eternal, and unchangeable, and transcendent over all of creation, and omnipresent throughout all creation, the Bible teaches that God can condescend, he can enter into his creation, and he can appear when he chooses to do so in a visible manner. That has never been something that Christians reject, right? We don't think that God's eternal nature is limited. We don't think that he has hands, face, eyes, and so forth. But we most certainly believe that the creator of heaven and earth can reveal himself to his creatures if he chooses to. But that's not a Muslim belief. They don't think God can do that sort of thing. So when the Islamic sources say Allah has all of these attributes, they're not talking about a condescension of Allah, Allah stooping down and humbling himself in such a way that he can appear to creatures. So they're saying their God really is like this. He exists up there. He really sits on a throne. His feet are on the kursi, right? They're on the little stool, the footstool. He's held up by 8 angels, according to the Quran, right? He lives in a house. He looks out over a watchtower. He hides behind a veil. He casts a shadow, according to the Islamic sources. I mean, he has a shadow. There's a reflection. I mean, the sun can't pass through him because he's solid after all, right? That's how Allah is presented in the sources. But Christians, on the other hand, say that no, God is not like that in his essential nature, but he can condescend. He can appear. And this is what Christians mean by theophany, right? There are theophanies in the Bible, instances of God appearing in human form.
Okay, so similar question or comment. Do you believe Yahweh literally residence in the temple, like Bible says? Because we were talking about Allah is from the balcony, all those kind of things. So Yahweh is residence in the temple.
Okay, so a couple things here. Number one, remember, as I said, that as Christians, we think that God is infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. So he can't be limited to or confined to anything, but he can manifest his presence in special ways wherever he wants. So God dwelling in the temple is not a problem for Christians, right? If Allah, though, on the other hand, is eternally a being with a face, eyes, hands, and so forth, then he is confined to wherever he's at. He's confined to his throne. He's confined to his house. He's confined to it, and so forth. The passages that talk about God and the temple, listen to what it actually says. This is Solomon at the dedication of the temple. Okay, Solomon at the dedication of the temple. Solomon says this. Hold on, let me just pull it up real quick. So this is 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 23. Solomon said, "The Lord, the God of Israel," so he's praying to God, "there's no God like you in heaven above or on earth below, you who keep your covenant of love with your servants who continue wholeheartedly in your way. You have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. With your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it as it is today. Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David, my father, the promises you made to him when you said, you shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel, if only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully as they have done. And now, God," okay, listen closely, "of Israel, let your word that you promised your servant, my father David, come true." And then he says, "But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple which I have built?" Okay, did you catch that? Solomon is saying, you have promised that you would dwell here with your people in a special way. Will you really do so? We know that you can't be contained by anything. right? Not even heaven itself can contain you. You transcend all created reality, right? So God is present everywhere and transcends all created reality. So it's no problem for God to specially manifest his presence in the temple like he did. Um, but there is trouble for Allah because he's not everywhere.
Yeah, plus like what's happening in Kaaba as well. On that topic, so someone is making a comment. This is, I think, one of the best response I ever heard. Speaking and entering the creation are not the same thing. So we talked about how Allah enters the creation and then speaks to Moses, like in Surah 27 in burning bush. In here, individual is expressing speaking and entering the creation are not the same thing. So apparently Allah's speech can be very much separated from him, while Allah is in somewhere else. His speech can be on the burning bush.
So notice how, I'm going to refute him on this point in just a second, but notice how he's proven a different point that I've made. I have said that Allah's attributes are something other than him. So now he's admitted that there's a bifurcation, a separation between Allah and his attributes. Allah can't enter into his creation, but somehow his attribute of speech can. That's what we mean by saying Muslims are guilty of polytheism, of shirk, of associating partners with their deity. But now, let me just show you that the Quran itself does not say that it's simply Allah's speech that's heard in the creation. It's actually Allah himself who is present and speaking. So remember, there's 4 places in the Quran that talk about this. So here's Surah 19. It says, this is from verse 50, also mention in the book the story of Moses. So Muhammad is being told to mention the story of Moses. For he, Moses, was specially chosen, and he was an apostle and a prophet. And we, this is the Allah's we, right? And we called him from the right side of Mount Sinai and made him draw near to us for mystic converse. And out of our mercy, we gave him his brother, Aaron, a prophet. You notice that? It doesn't just say that Muhammad heard or Moses heard Allah's words. It says, we called him from the right side of Mount Sinai and made him draw near to us. Near to my words or near to us? It says it drew near to us. Here's Surah 20, verses 9 and so forth, or following. But when he came to the fire, a voice was heard, O Moses, verily, I am your Lord. Therefore, in my presence, put off your shoes. You are in the sacred valley Tuah. I have chosen you. Listen then to the inspiration. Verily, I am Allah, and so on and so forth. Now, here is Surah 27. But when he came to the fire, a voice was heard. Blessed is he who is in the fire and those around it, and glory to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. It speaks of him being in the fire. Okay, so you can't. I mean, and this, by the way, just so people can tie this back in with some of the earlier conversation. Remember, I mentioned those different Muslim groups who are trying to deal with these things. Some said he has attributes, some says he doesn't have attributes, and so forth. The ones, the Mu'tazili were so embarrassed by this that they not only had to ignore the statements about Allah being present there and Moses drawing near to him, Allah being in the fire and so forth. They were so embarrassed by this that they didn't even believe that Allah's word or speech could enter into creation. Rather, they said that Allah created sound that was heard by Moses. So it wasn't even Allah's literal speech. Okay. So again, this Muslim has not only proven my point that I made earlier, that there's a bifurcation, a separation between Allah and his attributes. Allah can't enter into creation, but his attributes can. Number 2, he's just wrong about the Quran. The Quran does say that Allah was there. And number 3, this illustrates the very problem that the early Muslims were wrestling with, as I pointed out towards the beginning.
On that, there is a question on kind of asking for reference. reference for the source that the traditionalists believe that attributes are exist independent of Allah?
Okay, so here I'm trying to think if so you can go there's a couple things you can do here. So I have a video on Acts 17 apologetics, and I think it's the video called Mutilating Allah. If it's not that, then look up my series called Allah the Man God, right? Allah the Man God. So MAN hyphen God. And in those videos, I'm pretty sure somewhere along the way, I quoted some Muslim scholars on this. Number two, you can look at my article on Allah's hands on answeringislam.org, where I quote various Islamic scholars. My main thing, I'm just trying to remember what I include in that article, because my main goal was to show the actual sources, the Quran and Hadith. Though I do recall quoting various Muslims. I also have a article on Answering Islam called Allah the Man God, where I quote some sources. In fact, I mean, let me. I could easily pull any of these up, but actually, let me give you a few other sources. So this is a book written by Hamza Yusuf, and it's his interpretation of the creed of Imam al-Tahawi, so an Islamic creed, and it's basically an Ash'ari creed. And in here, he talks about the dispute among the Muslims between the early traditionists who said Allah has literal attributes, the Jam'iyya and the Mu'tazili who deny that he has attributes, and the later Ash'ari and Maturidi. I also have many other books where, for example, this is a book written by Ibn al-Jawzi. It's called The Attributes of God, and so it's a translation of one of his works relevant to this issue. He was a Hanbali scholar, and he's actually writing against other Muslims in his madhab. So in Islam, you've got these schools of thought, and his madhab included people like Qadi Abu Yala and others who believed Allah had literal attributes. And so he's actually writing a refutation of these earlier Muslims. Okay. I mean, I have books galore that talk about this issue that I could recommend to people. Here are books. It's a 2-volume series. This is Uthaymeen's commentary on Kitab at-Tawhid, in which he talks about Allah having literal attributes. Here is Ibn Taymiyyah. Well, actually, it's Uthaymeen, the same person's commentary on Ibn Taymiyyah's Al-Aqidah al-Wasatiyah. And by the way, there's a Muslim online who's actually going through this series. Okay. In fact, I could keep showing you books here, but I think what's most helpful, I think if you, I did a video, I'm trying to remember which video it was, on David's channel, where I show you Muslims actually arguing that Allah has hands and stuff like that. Don't I? Or is that on my page? I think I might have to look and see if it's on my page.
I think that's old video, so that's probably David's channel.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember. It's one of the videos. I know that if they look up where is Allah, you'll see certain Muslims arguing
that's in
that Allah.
David's channel.
Yeah. So where is Allah is on Acts 17 apologetics. Look up that. You'll see Muslims themselves saying Allah is in a certain place, and then other Muslims saying no, he isn't, and he's here and elsewhere, and all this other stuff. But I'm pretty sure I did a video just not too long ago, and I guess I can keep looking for it while
Also,
we're talking.
another reference, Abu Muin al-Nasafi, is talking about Allah and his attributes. They are eternal or not eternal, in page 90 and 91. And then also we've got Ghazali's talking about it. Hanbali Creed talking about foot of Allah, his face, all those kind of things. And then express that there is nothing like Allah but. And then someone just sent me a message. Your name was on it. Let me just check what is. I think this is the reference. Okay, so the video you are talking about is called "Mutilating Allah." Anthony Rogers on Acts Acts 17 apologetics. So people can watch the video to get the references.
Right. Yeah. So there's references in those videos.
And it is sad that Muslims are asking Christians to give reference while all Muslims are just like trying to ignore the topic. That's a bit sad, but
Yeah. Well, was that a Muslim asking or?
it was Muslim who was asking.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, he should know. He should know that this is just standard,
Yeah.
internecine conversation among Muslims. There's no. I'm not. Remember, I always like to preface it with this, and I did say this towards the beginning. When I approached the Islamic sources, my assumption was we don't have a difference on this area. We all agree that God is infinite, eternal, and unchangeable. So he's a spiritual being, not material, doesn't have hands, feet, eyes, or any of that. That was my assumption. I thought we all, because I had talked to Muslims. We're talking like 25 years ago, right? I had talked to Muslims and I just assumed that our major differences were things like the deity of Christ, the Trinity, the incarnation of Christ, his death, burial, resurrection for our sins, those sorts of things. But over time, I thought, wait a minute, why do these sources just keep speaking in these ways that seem to force you in one direction? Like Allah really does have these attributes. And then I became more and more familiar with the Hadith, and then became more and more familiar with Islamic scholarship. Um, I mean, I I could keep going, pulling books off the shelf. I mean, look at this particular book. This book was written by Zulfikar Ali Shah. It's a massive book dealing with the anthropomorphic depictions of God, and he's trying to argue against it, but he's a Muslim. And
Yeah.
so he, of course, has to interact with things found in the Quran and the Hadith, and that was taught by the earliest Muslims. In fact, I saw a video of Yasser Qadi interacting with this guy and two other scholars. So it's not on Yasser Qadi's page. That's the video I'm trying to think of, because I have a video that I did not long ago on Acts 17 where I have Yasser Qadi in it from that. I'm going to look for this while we're talking, but the point of the video. So remember, Yasser Qadi, even though he's fallen on hard times with the Ummah, right? Yasser Qadi is he's skating on thin ice, right? I saw the other day, I think, gosh, I'm trying to think of the Muslim's name, but
Is
Sam posted a video from this guy the other day, and I usually watch his stuff anyways, but it was another Muslim scholar saying, "Don't listen to Yasser Qadi." Of course, Abu Musab says, "Don't listen to Yasser Qadi." All these guys that are Salafis are saying, "Don't listen to this guy." But part of the reason they're so upset with him is not just for the reason that most Muslims are, right? Because he's admitted embarrassing facts about the Quran. They're upset with Yasser Qadi because he used to be a hardline Salafi. Okay. He still believes their doctrine of God, but he's compromised on a number of other issues. But he still believes Allah has a face, Allah has eyes, He has hands, feet, and all of that. And so I have a video where Yasser Qadi was interacting with this other Muslim, Zulfikar Ali Shah, and actually defending the idea that Allah has attributes.
Yeah. A couple of questions I'm gonna bring it up. I'm not sure like how wise it is for us to bring up Yasser Qadi again, because I am afraid of his life these days, but because he also kind of made a comment on shirk as well. Anyway, so question is, can you define what entering into creation means? Can you describe what that means exactly? I think they are struggling with what Allah did in Surah 27.
Yeah, so that's from a Muslim.
I'm guessing person is Muslim.
Okay. Well, in the first place, I mean, we can make this very simple. Okay. Without even getting very philosophical and trying to explain concepts to anyone that they might not be familiar with, Muslims claim Jesus can't be the incarnation of a divine person because God can't enter into his creation. So whatever you're objecting to there is precisely what we're objecting to when it comes to Allah speaking to Moses from within a bush. You know, if you say the one can't happen, namely the incarnation, we say the other can't happen. Okay? We believe that God is able to interact in his creation and with his creation. Okay? And it doesn't take, remember, these things are communicated in the Bible in a way that can be understood by everyone, right? Scripture teaches that Christ appeared in human form. We're told that God dwelt in the temple in a special way. His glory was there. The people knew it. But none of this meant that God was limited by any of these things, right? So if that's what Muslims are objecting to, and it is, they're objecting to God dwelling in the temple, to God becoming incarnate in the person of Christ, while still, of course, being infinite and transcending heaven and earth. If that's what they're objecting to, then in principle, they're refuting themselves when they include in the Quran this very same kind of thing. Allah speaking from within a bush to Moses, and Moses actually drawing near to him. Okay, so there was a proximity, right? A relationship in which Moses physically stood to Allah. So that's the very simple answer. You want to get more technical, we could be more technical, but it doesn't require any sophistication to see that Muslims have a problem here.
Yeah, and
And it's not the problem.
in Surah 27, um, that voice is identified as Allah Himself. I am Allah, it states. And then also I
Right.
put on the screen hadith where Allah enters into His creation. So whatever definition you are looking at, I think Sahih Bukhari and Quran kind of gives it clear, makes it clear like Allah does something, gets involved into His creation, the one He created.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm so behind of the comments. The Christian God can have a Tiffany, I can't pronounce this word, unlike Allah, who has body parts in his true form. Do you agree, disagree? I think this comment like appears with the color, but
Yeah. So I think I heard you right. I'm just waiting for it to pop up on the YouTube screen so that I know. I'm sure that. So you're saying
the
the
Christian,
person said that God can appear in a
funny,
theophany, but
yeah,
the God of Islam can't.
yeah.
Right. If Muslims are right, then we shouldn't have any passages in the Quran of Allah appearing and speaking to Moses. And I do think there's much in the Quran that does argue against the idea that Allah can appear in his creation. The problem is there are passages that contradict it because Muhammad was sloppy when he was doing his buffet thing, and he included in the Quran things that shouldn't be in there. But Christians believe that God can appear. Think about this, for example. We believe that angels are spiritual beings. They don't have bodies. but angels appear in human form in the Bible, right? Angels are able to condescend and appear in a physical way. Daniel, in the book of Daniel, even says, he refers to the man Gabriel, right? He's calling Gabriel a man. That's how Gabriel has appeared to him. He knows he's an angel, but he's appeared in human form. So we're just saying, in the same way, God is able to appear. It'd be really foolish for any being to create a universe that he couldn't enter into, right? It's like a um, a landowner creating a house that he couldn't go inside. What kind of sense would that make, right? We'd all say he's a foolish landowner. My kid always laughs at me. I say my kid. I've got four, but my son is the one that usually has to feel uh, it. I constantly lock myself outside because I go outside, I'll come back in, I'll do all sorts of things. I'm running around, and I have this habit. It's been ingrained in me since I was a young kid of locking the door. So I can like walk out a door and lock it at the same time. It's like one movement because I've done it so often. I grew up in Southern California. It wasn't always the safest place, so you had to make sure things were okay. So what happens though is if I'm at home and I'm not really going away from the house, I might just be running around outside. Maybe I'm moving the trash can somewhere or something. And so I end up locking myself out and my son has to come, open the door for me. Well, I mean, imagine Muslims are saying, poor Allah, he made a world and he just can't get in. It's like he's outside, saying, please, people, let me in. Um, you know,
On the topic of Allah entering his creation, the question is, does his essence also enter his creation?
well, I don't know what they think the word essence means. Um, God's essence is ineffable to us, meaning it's beyond our comprehension. Remember, I mean, even man's physical body, even the very atoms that everything are made of, no creature can plumb the depths of any of those things, right? No philosopher, no scientist thinks that he has gotten to the essence of things. Okay, so we don't even know the essence of creation, much less the essence of God. But it's certainly not anything created. It's certainly not material. And so when Muslims think of God being here and present and so forth, they're thinking of it as a kind of physical thing, right? But that's not what I mean at all. Uh, God is able to be entirely present in one place as well as in every other place. It's not as if, part of God is in America and another part of God, like a big toe, is over there in China, right? God is not made up of parts, and it's certainly not physical. And so I just think they're not really thinking through what it is Christians mean by God in the first place when they start asking questions like, is it his essence that enters it? Because, I mean, really, I don't believe that entering it is even the best language, because I don't believe the world was ever devoid of God. When God created the world, it was necessarily always something that he was ever present to. There's no point in time at which the world was ever somehow uh, apart from him, right? That he wasn't there upholding and governing it. Scripture says that God upholds and governs the world by the word of his power. Every single atom is upheld by him, right? He is presently sustaining everything in creation. So, but again, just going back to the simple remarks, because I think that's where Muslims need to begin, right? I think that they're busying themselves with more sophisticated lines of thought because they want to keep this out of range for themselves, right? They want to be able to talk themselves into thinking that they've got some good issue here against Christianity, but they don't. According to them, Jesus can't be God because God can't enter into his creation. So God cannot live and act as a human being in this world. And yet the Islamic sources say Allah appeared in a bush and spoke to Moses, or from a tree, right? The Quran says tree. So whatever we're talking about here, uh, it's the same across the board, right? You can't object to one while you still have the other in your Quran.
And next one is kind of a statement. Someone came to the conclusion that Islam says God is everywhere.
Well,
Don't
again,
say this at Speaker's Corner because you will get into troubles if you say God is in everywhere, because Muslims are gonna say, is God in the bathroom? Is God in here? Just be wise. But anyway.
yeah. In fact, go watch my video that's on where is Allah. Okay, I have a video, and it's all Muslim scholars. It's on Acts 17 apologetics. It's called "Where is Allah?" In the video, you'll see Muslims arguing over this. You have the Muslims who today still hold to the belief of the earliest traditionist Muslims, saying Allah is not everywhere. He is not in his creation. He is on top of a throne held up by 8 angels who are standing on top of 7 heavens, which are on top of 7 earths. So Allah is a really, 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 really long ways away, right? That's why he doesn't make visits very often. Okay. Actually, there are sources that say he descends to the lowest heavens the last third of the night. But the point is that the Muslims do not teach that Allah is everywhere. Like Hatun was saying, many Muslims get extremely upset when you say this, because then they start saying, are you saying that Allah is even present in the bathroom? Are you saying he's present, in a bar? Now, when we say he's present, again, it's not a physical thing. God is not like being contaminated with cooties, right? It's not like there are germs that he's contracting so that he can't be somewhere. But of course, God has to be everywhere, upholding everything, or it wouldn't exist. But the other thing is, think of the problem this creates when you say that Allah is not everywhere. If he's not everywhere, he's not in the bathroom, then maybe you should go do your dirty business in the bathroom, right? All a Muslim has to do if he wants to do something bad like drink is go to the bathroom and drink. If he wants to commit adultery, all he has to do is go into the bathroom. Allah won't follow you. He'll never know what you're doing, right? And by the way, the angels can't record it either, because the angels won't enter into that sort of thing, right? I mean, I have here, actually, I don't. It's across the room. I have Ahmed bin Hanbal's Musnad, where somebody comes to Muhammad and says to him, Gabriel hasn't been visiting you in a while, right? And it almost sounds like the person sticking it in Muhammad's face, like this bothers Muhammad. And then Muhammad says, well, maybe it's because you people won't cut your fingernails and trim your hairs or whatever. And what he's saying is, the reason Gabriel hasn't come is because Gabriel can't be in certain circumstances, right? People who don't follow Allah's OCD rules, right? If they don't follow Muhammad's every action, then the angels won't come. The angels won't be present. The angels don't enter a house with a dog. The angels don't enter houses with pictures, right? So they won't enter the bathroom either. So if you want to do something wrong, just go in the bathroom. But by the way, I should say this. The vast majority of time when you look at the Islamic sources, they talk about Allah being above the 7 earths, above the 7 heavens, above the throne, above the eight angels, right? And he's not in every place, he's only in one place. You have a couple of statements that some Muslims try to use to prove that Allah's everywhere, like the statement, that he is
Close to your jugular vein?
Yeah, there's the statement he's closer to you than your jugular vein, and then another statement similar to that. Oh man, these people like calling me. This poor guy. So that's actually, anyways, that's a prisoner calling me. I keep missing his call, but anyways, so what Muslim scholars will say is that it's not Allah who's present, it's Allah's knowledge that's present, right? So he's close to us with his knowledge. And we could even ask, how is his knowledge present if he's not? And you might get different answers from Muslims. Some Muslims would say he knows because there are angels here recording it, and they report back to Allah, right? Other Muslims would just say that somehow his eyes are here, his seeing is here, but he's not here. They come up with all these different little excuses to get out of it. But again, it involves them in all the problems that I've been bringing up. Allah has a plurality of attributes. They're separate from his being and from each other. They involve Muslims in shirk. And, it's just problems galore.
There are a couple of more questions are coming on the essence of Allah and how kind of they're independent or they're separated or what it's all. But I think we can deal with them later because I'm aware that your phone is buzzing. Last
No, that's
question.
fine.
I'll ask you the last question. Last question is I think it was Nada. She wants you to talk about womb of Allah. Can you please explain the womb of Allah?
Okay. Now I'm wondering where it went because I had it not long ago. Let me see here. I didn't have Allah's womb. I had my book.
I was just gonna comment on that, but okay.
Hold on one second.
Until Anthony comes back, I'll put the slides where we remember the womb of Allah, and probably he has different slides or different references, so that will be. And he's gone for a long time.
Yeah, because he has way too many books. But let me just see here if I think I have. What is this article? So that's. Let me see if I have. Do the Islamics. So why?
I've got a hadith on Bukhari where womb of I've got a couple of hadiths, but I am not sure if you are looking at different ones.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm trying to. I wanted to quote the actual untampered with hadith. Doesn't make any sense that my book is not like right here where I had it a second ago. I'm pretty sure I had it right before I came on. But that's just one of those things, I guess. So let me just see if I happen to have. See, the problem is that, as I said, so you have these 3 hadiths in Bukhari where it makes reference to his womb. There are other hadiths that makes reference to the womb, but the ones I'm specifically thinking of that also include this business about Allah's loins. The Arabic is not translated correctly in Muhammad Mushin Khan's most famous translation of Bukhari. He doesn't even include this part of the Arabic, much less translate it into English. You have to go to scholars that are pointing this out. And actually, it's strange, but in the abbreviated or the abridged version of Sahih Bukhari by Mushin Khan, actually has this hadith, the full hadith, right? So it takes out certain hadiths, but it includes others. It has the full Arabic that you don't find in the larger set, but it doesn't translate it there either. So you can actually look at the Arabic and see it there, but you don't find the statement in the hadith. I don't think I'm going to find it. So,
Okay, that's fine. I think Nada is kind of a bit curious about this because she's setting up website just dedicated to the womb of Allah.
so I can tell you this then. Look up the book called Anthropomorphism by a Jewish scholar. Her name is Livnat Holtzman. Livnat Holtzman. And I'm just going to look it up on Amazon just to make sure. I mean, I can actually post the link in there. Livnat Holtzman. Here it is. I mean, this is an incredibly good scholarly book. This lady is a powerhouse. She also has a lot of different articles on line, like academia. So I just posted the link to the Amazon page for Livnat Holtzman. And the book, or excuse me, the chapter that especially deals with this is chapter 5. So
Where did you put the link on the Skype?
no, I'm sorry. I just put it. I could send it through Skype.
No. So you've got access to YouTube? You put it
Yeah.
on you. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so that's something homework for Nada to figure out all the details about the womb of Allah. Okay, so we've been live for 2 hours 16 minutes 29 seconds, and I am like more confused with Allah and his attributes and his body parts, and in somehow it makes me more confused and more confused and more confused. That
Well,
means
I'm always happy to have helped.
no, like Muslim sisters answer those questions. So like if there is a confusion, like they're expert on it, probably they will help us to figure out hand of Allah and all other attributes. So overall, is it correct to say, okay, when it comes to Allah and his attributes, they are not he, but also not other than him, correct?
That's what some would say.
And of course, Allah knows best what it means.
Yeah, and who else could possibly understand any of that? um,
Um,
yeah.
would you mind just summarize follow us for this all? What is the implication of this mess?
Okay, so number one, Muslims in their dawah efforts claim that their doctrine of God is simple and agreed upon by all Muslims. It's not. It's not simple, and it's not agreed upon by all Muslims. Secondly, they claim that it's pure monotheism, when contrasted with Christianity, right, which they claim is polytheism. The problem is Christians have a much stronger view of the unity of God than Muslims do, because we don't think of God's attributes or the persons of the Trinity as somehow independently existing beings and things, like Muslims do when it comes to Allah, his attributes, and so forth. They speak of these as separable things. There's an eternal Quran that's other than Allah, that's his attribute of speech, that's able to do things that Allah can't do. Third, they have the problem of anthropomorphism, which not only means that Allah has these parts and so isn't absolutely one, but it also creates a problem in terms of his relationship to space and time. I mean, how does he exist as that kind of a being if he doesn't have a universe already in which to exist? Right? We read in scripture, God created the world and then he created man. He created the world first, he created the heavens and the earth, and then he created man who was going to dwell in them. Same logic would have to apply to Allah. If Allah has eyes and face and ears and so forth, then he needed a heavens and earth in which to exist. And you can't say that he existed before these things, because he needs those to exist. So there's just problems upon problems with all of this. And I've just never met the Muslim that can deal with any of this. And what they end up doing, even if you grant things that really aren't, supported by the Islamic sources, even if you grant a lot of the things that they try to say to get out of the problem, number one, they don't get out of the problem really, but number two, they end up getting closer and closer to Christianity in order to save their doctrine, right? Because their doctrine is not coherent, but they realize they need something like the Christian doctrine in order for it to be intelligible. So you had the example of the person saying, that I'm trying to think the person who said that Allah's attributes are not separate from him, they're just distinct,
Yeah.
right? But that just sounds like he's trying to sound like a Christian,
Yeah.
right? The persons of the Trinity are distinct persons, but not separate, right? It's one God who exists as three persons. So, yeah, huge issue, always has been. That's why Muslims hate Yasser Qadi, because he was an advocate of this view, and now seems to be saying some things that don't look very good for the Salafi cause. That's why all Muslims are really battling each other on this issue. I mean, I don't know if you ever answered, but I think you see this at Speaker's Corner, right? You
Yeah.
see them arguing over this?
Yeah.
Muslims, right?
Yeah, we've got three different groups. There is like one gentleman, one Muslim. Not sure if gentleman is right term there, but one Muslim is Ashari. So he like there was a debate with the Salafis on discussion, and then on the other hand you've got Shias who doesn't make any sense at all with this, and also another individual Muslim missionary once said, for example, Quran is eternal, but that means like it's going to be eternal. So there was a time and place, those things are going to be eternal, are created to be eternal. So that when it comes like Quran, but the body parts of Allah, there are some in-house discussions at Speaker's Corner. Okay, I think we will finish this topic here. And yeah, I seriously concerned about Yasir Qadi because have you seen the video he put together? Was pouring his heart towards David Wood and Jay Smith and Dan Brubaker, like how much he
I
loves them with like all those bad
Oh yeah,
languages.
I did a little video where Jay put it up on his channel where
Okay.
it's got the music in the background.
Okay.
Remember there's
Um.
one where the dogs are barking while he's talking. I had the dogs barking in the background.
Oh,
And
I
then,
didn't. I don't think I saw that one.
and then it has the piano playing when David and Jay are talking. You didn't see my video on that?
I'll check it. Okay. So that the original video, which Yasir Qadi gave me copyright strikes to. Now it's not on YouTube. Are you aware of it? He took the video down.
Oh, did he? The ultra crepidarian video.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh my. Well, all of us record. I don't know what he's thinking. I mean,
I think
do you think
video is not there anymore. So because I got finally after nearly 3 months, I got one copyright thing is being taken away because false claim.
Mhm.
So I wanted to kind of make a video. So I went to get the original video, but original video is not there anymore. So
Oh, I have it.
yeah, like I think when he poured his heart, he become regretful, and therefore I concern for his life. That's why I say like just be gentle. Rejection makes people commit suicide. Just never.
His heart is um
Anyway, okay.
yeah.
So last question on the spiritual advice side, pastoral question. I'm sure we will kind of go through this video again, get all the references, work through, and continue to challenge Muslims about how awesome this messed up Tawhid is as time goes on. But in couple of weeks, in Christian family, in the body of Christ, we will starting Lent. Have you got like any advices to us for Lent?
Well, not per se.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really familiar with the practice of Lent. I know that's popular in some contexts, but it's just not one that I'm overly familiar. I mean, I understand partially what goes on with that whole thing, but um, yeah, I'm just
Okay.
not.
Okay.
I'm not specifically.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah. Got another pastoral question?
No, no, no.
I mean,
That's more than enough. That's more than enough. Okay.
yeah,
Sorry, when the messages comes, can you ask Anthony? So I think we will deal with the other questions in our next conversation. There are some questions are coming in with Allah entering His creation with His essence, or linked with the topic we discussed. I think we will pick them in our next meeting, because I kept you for nearly 2.5 hours. That's like very long time. I'm sorry that you had to take the time from your family to be with us. Thank you very much for that.
all right.
And dear beloved ones, thank you very much for joining us. And dear Muslim friends, I do hope that you come to notice that actually it's really messed up, very much messed up. And all this mess can only be cleared up with the death and resurrection of Lord Jesus Christ, which it's already taking place. All you need to is look up to Him, accept Him as your Savior, accept Him as the eternal Son of the Father, and by believing in Him, you will have eternal life, not messed up with the body parts of Allah or the things Allah doesn't even know at this stage. And we will see some of you probably on Monday in a live stream, or if that doesn't happen, we will see you at the bosom of the Father. Anthony, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.